Trey McBride and James Conner are as solid as they come, but Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. are looking to bounce back after a disappointing first season as a duo. We dig into the top three storylines for the Arizona Cardinals entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we are discussing all things Arizona Cardinals. We have some big storylines here with, after a very disappointing year for both Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., we're very, very excited when they selected Marvin Harrison Jr. in the 4th overall pick in the 2024 draft. It just didn't really come to fruition last year, and it wasn't as much as we needed from them with their draft costs. However, James Conner came through again. I mean, he might just be the most underrated running back across the NFL. And then Trey McBride, another huge year. He pulled off that big breakout, and now he's super, super expensive in drafts. So we have to figure out if he's worth that cost. Let's start with Kyler Murray. Vinny, do you think he still has top 5 upside as a fantasy asset? His current ranking is quarterback 8. He was a quarterback 10 overall last year, but quarterback 12 in average scoring. In 2023, he was the quarterback 10 in average scoring. 2022, quarterback 7. We had some, big years in 2021 and 2020 when he was a top 5 quarterback in both of those seasons. But with Drew Petzing, not much changing this offseason. Does he have top 5 upside?
Yeah, it's hard to say that he does because the Cliff Kingsbury mojo that was getting Kyler Murray those numbers is now in Washington with Jaden Daniels. So if you're looking for the Kyler Murray mojo, I think you have to go to Washington and take Kyler Murray. I guess he's like 4.0 at this point with Lamar Jackson and some other guys that have come to the league and kind of taken where Kyler was as a cheat code and taken it a whole nother level as a passer. And that's a good place to start with Kyler Murray. He's just not a passer we can really count on anymore. He's kind of a shorter yardage type guy at this point with his yards per attempt. He's never pushed 30 touchdowns in a season. He's only broken 25 once in terms of passing. He's not sniffed 4,000 yards passing in any given season. And that's what we've seen from like Lamar Jackson, right? Evolved to a point where he can throw for 40 touchdowns in the season and still run for that massive volume. And that's a problem. I still think Kyler is going to go off as a runner, but when you look at it last year, this is a good sample size because he played all 17 games, 78 rushing attempts. And that's not good when you think about it. Yes, that's a low number. That's less than 5 per game. And then he averaged 33.6 yards per game. That's not going to get it done when you're a runner, right? That's okay if you're like an athletic dude, right? Like say if there's like a Mac Jones or Trevor Lawrence, like adding some numbers like that, you're okay, right? But when you're billed as a running quarterback, and that's going to be a big part of what you do, then that number and attempts need to be higher. He kind of got saved a couple times by how many times he's able to score on the ground. He had 5 touchdowns last year. Then you look back at his big year, he had 11, but that's also when he was running at a ridiculous clip in his best season. 8 attempts per game. So you're talking about almost having that right now at this point. And then you have 51 yards was his best output per game. And that's a good almost 20 yards less, right? And those add up over the course of a season. So really the question comes down to, I think we've seen Kyler Murray as a passer. We've got Marvin Harrison. I think we know that his ceiling is pretty limited as a passer. So if he's going to bridge that gap and give us a production, that's to be on the ground. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that from this offense. And the one thing that is actually good, even though it was bad, is that we got to see Kyler Murray fully healthy last season and play all those games. So we knew exactly what we're getting from this offense. It was not like guessing or projecting or trying to figure out what he was going to do when he was fully healthy. But the thing about Kyler Murray is I don't think he wants to be known as a running quarterback. Like he doesn't kind of embrace that part of his game, just like just do it. Like, you're really good at doing it. Don't worry about how many times you run per game. Like, if you have to run 10, 12 times in certain games to help your team win, do it. Like, don't worry about, oh, I want to be known as a guy who passes downfield. Well, you're not being known for that either at this point and making the big plays passing. So Kyler Murray, I think, just like we have with him, he's gone through an identity crisis, and I'm not sure I want to go to him to figure this out and hope for the best and go back to some career high numbers that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to get that top-notch season from him again. I do think his quarterback 8 ranking isn't like extremely high. I would prefer more though in like the 10 to 12 range. I think that's the type of quarterback he is. He still has plenty of big games. Like last year, he still scored over 20 fantasy points, 7 of his 17 games played. That was only one less such game for both Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, who we're not worried about at all going into next year. The issue is that the other games are so bad, are like he do anything, while those other guys like Hurts and Burrow are much more consistent, that even like when they're not scoring 20 points, they're still getting that 17, 18, 19 points most of the time, where it's the opposite with Murray. He's sometimes even fewer than 10 points, but it's like that 10 to 14 range that's just killing you. Now with his rushing yards, I do think maybe we're being a little bit harsh. He had 572 rushing yards last year, fourth most among quarterbacks. That's more rushing yards than Josh Allen had, only fewer than Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and also Jalen Hurts, but not that much fewer than Jalen Hurts, who had 630 yards compared to Murray's 572. So his rushing yards are plenty good enough to say he can be a top 10, top 8, maybe even top 5 quarterback. But you're right, the passing production just isn't there. 21 passing touchdowns last year, and 4 of those came in week 18. So it wasn't even helpful for most fantasy managers. And so that means 17 passing touchdowns he had from weeks 1 through 17 during the fantasy season. That's just not good enough. His passing percentage has been so incredibly low over the last few years. It's 3.9, 3.7, 3.6. When in 2021, when he was top 5, fantasy quarterback, it was at 5.0. Now, if he can get back to that, right, he has the weapons of Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, who really struggles to score touchdowns for some reason. Like, if he can start to hit those guys and score more touchdowns, then yeah, he has the potential. But what's really going to change when they haven't changed head coaches, when they haven't changed play callers? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's the problem, is there's no like exciting variables to get, okay, this guy can do this and this offense is the same offense. You also are past, again, the health issues where he's not, oh, he's on the mend, he's recovering, he's getting on track here. He's already done that in one full season. So you look at all that, and the data tells you that there's no vacated targets. So it's really the same targets here on top of the offensive scheme and just on top of the player. I mean, how much longer do we need to see a quarterback to know what he is, right? This is what he is. He's a very inconsistent player. And that's what we've seen with his fantasy numbers, but also inconsistent with his throws, like inaccuracy or really can look pretty on one ball. He's inconsistent with the way he decides to run and take off and what games he wants to really be out there. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like you see Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, the big separator we know is their teams are going to pound their big bodies near the goal line or push them across, right? The Cardinals don't need to do that because they have James Conner, who's their big power back, and you're not really wanting to slam Kyler Murray's small frame in the red zone, right? So he doesn't have that part of the cheat code working for him, and that's also detrimental. So I don't know. I just don't think you're going to get a great value, really, if you just take him at 8. In fact, you'll probably get diminished returns from that. I think it's just a name in the middle. Like, if you have to take him, look, you don't avoid all players, but I think I'd rather take him. They're 12, 13 in that range, because that's more of what you're going to get. So I think there's some hype involved with the hope, right, that he's going to finally put it all together. But again, this guy's been around for a long time, that we should know what we're getting from, even with some exciting young receivers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want, you want to take a guy like Kyler Murray, you might as well just wait, many rounds later and just take Justin Fields, right?
Yeah.
Fields is going to be the starting quarterback for the Jets. He's going to probably get more rushing yards. And I mean, the passing touchdowns aren't there for Kyler Murray anyways. Justin Fields can throw 20 touchdowns. So you might as well wait for him. But there's just too many guys after Kyler Murray that I would rather have, and Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, Brock Purdy at their cost, and Kyler Murray at quarterback 8. So he will not be on any of my teams at this cost. But, the potential's still there. I am looking forward to seeing what this offense looks like after Drew Punsing is gone and what Kyler Murray can get back to. But we have to now also figure out, is Marvin Harrison Jr. gonna, bounce back in his second season after a disappointing second year? Is Trey McBride worth his draft cost, even though he doesn't score any touchdowns? These are all questions we'll answer right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. That's what you want to do, and you get the surprising insights you need from Monarch Money to know how much and where you're spending things, what you can cut down on, such as food delivery. It's all in one convenience there for you. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances and even plan long-term goals. And it's easy collaboration. If you're managing money with your partner or spouse, it's smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all that stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right. It's only at monarchmoney.com, MONARCH, monarchmoney.com, LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get half off your first year. Smarter way to budget and do your finances, only at monarchmoney.com. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. And look at those top targets here for Kyler Murray. Marvin Harrison Jr. in a season where Malik Neighbors went off as a rookie. Brian Thomas Jr., these guys are right around Marvin Harrison Jr., they go off. But you only see this hyped rookie. It was obviously hyped because of his pedigree, his last name. Wide receiver 42 in points per game. That was highly disappointing. One of the bigger busts on the board considering his draft cost and where you took him. Now, he's ranked 21 this year. That's a major jump. That's basically going all those spots higher, like having it here, going from 42 to 21, 20 spots, and you go from a outside kind of flex play all the way up to a wide receiver 2. Is this fair, and why are we seeing this number here for Marvin Harrison?
Well, it's because of his early draft pedigree in the actual NFL draft, right? And all of the excitement of him coming out. I don't think it's fair to give up on this kid yet. He's turning 23 in August, so he's still 22 years old. And it's not like it was the worst rookie season ever, right? 885 receiving yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. He led the team in receiving touchdowns by a good chunk. And yes, it's disappointing. It's not at all what we wanted or expected because he was being drafted so high in fantasy drafts last year, but the potential's still there. And there is actually not a lot of history with first round wide receivers, ranging in the 800 to 900 receiving yard range. But a guy that did do that was DeAndre Hopkins. He was also stuck, on a bad situation, bad team. And he only had 91 targets in his rookie season. And then that blew up in his second year to 127, 1,200 receiving yards. But the difference, though, I want to point out is that Hopkins got a change in head coach and offensive coordinator. There is no change happening here. I think this is just my hardest problem with figuring out what's going to be the difference between Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 1 to year 2 when there's not really many vacated targets, right? There's still Trey McBride. There's still James Conner that's going to steal a lot of rushing touchdowns. It's still Kyler Murray throwing him the ball. It's still Drew Punsing as a play caller. So, maybe he can work on his separation skills and maybe that advances like crazy because that's what area he really struggled last year. But it's hard to say that he's worth jumping up 21 spots from where he finished last season.
Yeah, funny enough, another receiver who kind of had similar stats in his rookie season was Marvin Harrison Sr. He had 64 catches, he had 8 touchdowns to go with that, 836 yards. So he was very much in the ballpark of what his dad did as rookie. Now, I don't think people remember this at all because he ended up in the Hall of Fame as a receiver for the Colts. But there were 3 kind of meh seasons to start his career. It was a different time in fantasy for sure. Then some dude came along named Peyton Manning and changed the whole course of Marvin Harrison's career. So, and he was putting up some big numbers, and Peyton really didn't get to that like huge total until that real ridiculous 2006 season. So he was getting it done with Marvin Harrison even when he was putting up like 25 to 30 touchdowns in Indianapolis, and that is the problem here. Is Kyler Murray going to give you the front end of this that Peyton Manning gave his dad? I think the jury's still out on that, right? And that's a concern. So we could say it's a little bit Marvin Harrison Jr. and just not separating, but maybe it's just the connection was off with Kyler Murray and not getting the ball to him the right way. And we heard all about their chemistry, but I guess it wasn't totally factual that they were on the same page all the time, because I think they missed a few things. They looked great again when they were consistent and worked together. That's the problem. You're dealing with 2 inconsistent guys at this point. Like, is Kyler Murray going to throw the right accurate ball when Marvin Harrison Jr. has run the perfect route? We're not sure, right? That's what it comes down to. So they just have to get on the same page with chemistry. And I think the one thing that'll help, and we've noticed this a lot, the volume is there, right? The volume is always the king on top of the talent, the opportunity, and the ability to get that. So he has a huge target share. Again, this team is not expected to be good again, so you'd figure there's going to be some targets and volume going his way. So you just need to convert this into a little bit more big plays, so we don't always have to grind through and get all those efficiency numbers here to get the yardage and touchdowns we want. Score a few more times, get a few more big plays, be a little bit more efficient with your catches, and you'll be okay. I just don't think I'm going to shoot him up that much. I mean, let's get him up to wide receiver 3 level first, right? Because we can't bump him up that much with the quarterback situation, not anything changing with the targets. I don't think you can, when there's no change, I don't think there's a justification to shoot somebody up the board that high. Like, is it going to be better? For sure, but I'm going to go more wide receiver 29, 30 in that range than be that aggressive with going after Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like there's guys around him that are close. I mean, they're all risky in this area, and that's why they're in the 20s for this reason. But like, would you rather go, now that we know about Aaron Rodgers with the Steelers, would you rather go with DK Metcalf or Marvin Harrison Jr.?
See, I think I would go DK Metcalf because, again, you look at the targets, there's no Trey McBride there. No offense to our friend Pat Fryermuth, but not the same situation, right, to cut in. And, again, I think Aaron Rodgers is maligned and as head-scratching can be, and we will break down the Steelers, by the way, as our next team. He still is going to put the ball downfield and be a little bit more reliable of a downfield passer than Kyler Murray. So keep that in mind. And again, if you have a big play guy, I think Metcalf fits the bill there. So again, that's a good game to play, I think, Michelle, like internally for our listeners and viewers here, just to say, hey, would I draft this guy over Marvin Harrison Jr.? Really have an explanation on, yeah, okay, now I'm going to take Harrison, right? You just don't go into this, okay, his name is Marvin Harrison. He's got to be good in year 2. He's got Kyler Murray. He's got to be good in year 2. No, actually examine the situation. That's why we're here to help and help look at that for you as well.
Now moving over to Trey McBride here, because right now his ranking is tight end 2 off the board, behind only Brock Bowers, 22nd overall player off the board. So you have to choose him over some really good wide receivers, running back, quarterbacks. He was the tight end 3 in total points and in average scoring last year. And he did that while only scoring 2 receiving touchdowns. Mm-hmm. He had the second most receptions and receiving yards among tight ends last year, behind only Brock Bowers in both. But McBride did miss a game, so he was clearly on pace to be first in both of those. But like I mentioned, it's the touchdowns. That's his biggest issue. He had 2 this last year and 3 the year prior. It doesn't really make a ton of sense, though, because he has 31 red zone targets over the last 2 years. That's tied for the 3rd most among tight ends, behind only Kelsey, Laporta, and tied with George Kittle. So the touchdowns should be there, and you would expect them to start to come. He did score a touchdown finally in each of the last 2 games last season after having 0 entering week 17. But like, can you take a guy this early when he's struggled to score touchdowns? Yes, the volume's there. He had 147 targets last year. So the receptions are there, the yards are there. But is he worth that draft cost?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the opportunity cost. Do you really want to give up a potential elite player at another position and say, I want to lock up tight end? The question is, what are you going to get later at tight end? How much are you willing to just say, I need to invest really highly in a tight end? Because there's some disappointments. I'm not quite sure about Travis Kelce anymore. Mark Andrews, I like him, but does he have the upside? Like, if you get past George Kittle, Trey McBride, and Brock Bowers, are you really super comfortable with anybody that says is going to be a difference maker, that's going to score that much more and act like a wide receiver? Maybe not, right? So I think McBride is pretty safe. Again, I like the fact that he scored late in the season, that they were conscious of that he wasn't scoring. So they need to make him a bigger asset in the red zone. We know he can dominate in other parts of the field. He's a tough guy to cover. Again, no vacated targets at the wide receiver or tight end, really any position overall on this team. So he's still going to be the key target. They didn't really add that much competition in this passing game, right? So when you look at all of that, I think, yeah, he's worth it. I think it's not so, is he worth taking as a second, first, or third tight end? It's, do you want to risk him over something else? Well, I think the one thing that would make you go in that direction of the risk is the fact that you know what you're going to get from him, at least, right? I think it's going to be rather consistent. There's no real bust potential, right? I think he's going to finish pretty high as a tight end. So that's maybe another reason why you would take him over another position that's volatile, like a wide receiver or running back, for sure. Because if he's on the field, which we expect him to be healthy for the most part, and produces, that you're going to get what you totally think you might out of Trey McBride, which is a refreshing thing. There's not a lot of guys in fantasy who could do that. Maybe the Cardinals actually have one of those players elsewhere at a position that we can talk about as well.
I would just like looking at where McBride's going and the guys going around him. I mean, you have to choose McBride over guys like Bucky Irving or Jonathan Taylor, Ladd McConkey, Kyron Williams, Jackson Smith-Njigba. But like, I can't justify that when, George Kittle's going 17 picks later on average than Trey McBride is. And you have to pick Kittle over guys like Joe Mixon, Rashee Rice, DJ Moore. I'm much more comfortable with doing that than the guys I named before. And I personally think Kittle's going to have the better year anyway. So I'm going to be waiting on him, or even Sam Laporta, a guy I really, really like to bounce back this next year. He's going 30 picks later than Trey McBride. And again, just the guys you have to choose him over are just so much easier to swallow. With Jamison Williams, you're choosing him over, or Marion Hampton or Xavier Worthy. Like, it's way too high of a price for me for Trey McBride. If the touchdowns come and he gets 10 touchdowns, sure, he's going to kill it and be so worth that draft cost, but just not worth the risk for me. Now, on the other hand, James Conner, sitting at running back 19 ranking. I mean, is there a guy more disrespected? I'm not sure, but he has to be maybe the safest RB2 pick to make. We will get into that right after a quick break. All right, let's close up today's show talking about Mr. James Conner, maybe one of my favorite running backs in the NFL. He has been for a long time now. He's so fun to watch, and he's so consistent, and he's just a really good fantasy asset, and he's always a really, really good value. Before we talk about that, I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So right now, James Conner is sitting at the running back 19 in consensus rankings. He was the running back 11 overall last year, running back 14 in average scoring, running back 10 in 2023, running back 10 in 2022, running back 6 in 2021. Now, he did just turn 30 years old in May, so he's getting up there in age. But I mean, he's been nothing but a top 12 running back, really top 10 since 2021. And just looking at running backs since 2021 who have played at least 50 games, he does rank as the running back 9 in points per game during that span, behind only great players like CMC, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, who's fallen off since then, Josh Jacobs, and Alvin Kamara. Connor's going to get so much work. He's going to get so many targets. He's going to get all the touchdown opportunities near the goal line. It doesn't really make sense to me why he'd be that low in the rankings.
Yeah, I think everyone is wondering when are the wheels going to fall off, and I thought they could last season, but Trey Benson didn't really materialize. Yeah, Murray DeMarcado, he's still on this roster right now as they're the 2 and 3 situation. So they didn't really change that much, right? And unless Trey Benson's improved dramatically as a power back, I don't know if he's going to see a lot more action. And I don't know why they would mess with the one thing that's productive and reliable in their offense, right? I mean, they want to make sure that they run the ball and stay balanced. And James Conner's also helped by the fact that Kyler Murray is not a quarterback who runs it in all that much, right? If James Conner was on the Bills or Eagles, he probably doesn't get nearly as many nice scoring opportunities as he does now, but that's why we like him. And maybe that's why the Cardinals liked him too, to have a guy that can finish when he's healthy. He's going to just give you all the yards that are there. He's going to grind to get the yards that are right in front of him, maximize his blocking. He's going to come through when you need him as a receiver, as an outlet guy. He can handle himself that way. So really, he's really worked himself into being just a good reality and fantasy back here, going all the way back to his days at Pitt. And then they needed somebody right away with Le'Veon Bell going nuts. And then you had James Conner come through. So he's kind of Mr. Reliable, right? When you need something done, you turn to James Conner. It's not exciting, maybe, to put him in your lineup week in and week out, but then you look up and say, oh, I got solid RB2 production for most of the season from this guy. So what you see is what you get. Again, for all the things that didn't change for the passing game, that's not going to make us want to invest more on Kyler Murray or Marvin Harrison or whatever. They didn't change for the running game. They didn't try to fix what wasn't broken there. So I think Conner, again, maybe has one good year of workhorse material left in him. I'm a little bit worried that he does have a history of injuries that we look at, but so does everybody. I think you do have a clear handcuff. However, Trey Benson, should something happen to Conner, I think they'd feel a little bit more comfortable with Benson getting key carries here this season. So that's another upside and plus to taking Conner. But yeah, it's exactly what you see is what you get, and it's good, right? He runs hard, he's going to finish well, and he's going to just be a complete back when you need him and can handle volume in certain games in the instances where the Cardinals have a lead.
Yeah, and what's nice is that even when they're down, they use him as a receiver.
Yeah.
So it's like he's never really knocked out of games because he is also the receiving back, and he is really, really solid at that. So when you're looking at James Conner's, cost, I think he's well worth it, especially if you take a guy with like high upside early on. Like let's say you take a shot on Ashton Genty in the first round as a rookie. Coming back around in the third round or something like that, third, fourth round, and taking James Conner as our RB2, that safe production every week to give you that running back 2 production where he also offers running back 1 upside. I just think that's a great match for a team building there. Now, would you rather, like he's going in the middle right now of Chuba Hubbard and David Montgomery? I would much rather Conner than either of those 2 guys. Are you with me there?
Yeah, the Chuba Hubbard situation I do not like as much now with Rico Dowdle in there. Do not like it because I think Dowdle could be a guy competing for touches. And the other one, you can't. I mean, David Montgomery is really, talk about a guy that's kind of kept his status up by scoring touchdowns. Again, James Conner's a lead back. So if you go that way, I think Conner, again, if you look at their similar assets of scoring touchdowns, that might be the harder decision. But I would say Conner because he's the lead back for sure in his offense. And again, I do not see a sudden split where they're going to get Benson involved all of a sudden for like 10 to 12 carries. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I'm with you. That will be it for today's episode and all of the things about the Cardinals going into the season. We're going to be moving into all the AFC North teams the rest of this week and next week. So we'll have the Pittsburgh Steelers on Wednesday's show talking about their fantasy outlook now that Aaron Rodgers is with the team. And then we'll get to the Ravens, Bengals, and Browns. So do not miss those episodes. We'll talk to you on Wednesday. Bye, y'all.